Good evening, everyone. I see that some of you already joined us and some are still joining. So while we're waiting, let me introduce our main presenter tonight. This webinar is hosted by Andrew Campbell, MD, a leading expert in the subject of mycotoxin awareness and treatment, and he is a medical director of Myco. He will discuss molds and mycotoxins, how to test for these, what treatments are available, and just as importantly, pitfalls in diagnosis and treatment. Dr. Campbell has published his findings with people affected by molds and mycotoxins in medical journals and as chapters in medical books. He has lectured on this subject at medical conferences all over the US, Canada, Mexico, and Europe. In all, Dr. Campbell has published over 90 studies, 19 of them on the effects of mold and mycotoxins in people. If you're interested, you can look these up in the National Library of Medicine at pubmed.gov and searching for Campbell A.W. Know that this is the first presentation in a series of webinars dedicated to mycotoxins and mycotoxin testing. The next webinar will continue this discussion and will include answers to participants' questions. We also would like for you to send any questions, requests, and feedback directly to us so we could address them in our next presentation. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I will give it over to Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, Ms. Natalie, for this. So let me start by telling you some very important points and by sharing with you some clinical pearls, okay? So let me begin with this. Everyone has an immune system, and everybody's immune system is unique and different. It's like a fingerprint. And this is why if everybody exposed to molds and mycotoxins follows the same protocol, it's not going to work for everybody. Everybody's different. That's why I've never used them. I've treated over 13,000 patients with suffering from molds and mycotoxins successfully. I'd see mom, dad, and 3 kids, and everybody was a bit different. So that's one thing. The other point, a clinical pearl, is mold is kind of like the gun, mycotoxins are the bullet. So that's an important factor to remember as well. The third one I want to share with you is the first rule of toxicology. The first rule of toxicology states that the first thing you've got to do is remove the toxin from the patient or the patient from the toxin. In other words, if there is mold and mycotoxins in your home or in your workplace, you've got to leave there, otherwise the treatment is not going to work at all. It doesn't matter because you're being constantly re-exposed to these things. So, and let me share with you that molds are always present in water-damaged places, either in the home or in the workplace, always. And wherever there's mold, they're always producing mycotoxins. Another clinical pearl, one mold does not produce one mycotoxin. A mold produces a series of mycotoxins, okay? So it's one and a lot of mycotoxins. So a lot of people can't see mold. The Environmental Protection Agency essentially says that approximately 50% of mold is hidden. It's inside walls, et cetera, so you don't always see it. And when people say they smell, it smells moldy, what you're actually smelling are the volatile organic compounds, VOCs, produced by molds and mycotoxins. It's not them themselves. You're smelling volatile organic compounds. So let's talk a little bit about the indoor air quality. Okay, the average American adult or the average 160-pound adult inhales about 700 square feet of air per day. That's a lot of air moving in and out of your lung, and whatever's in that air in the indoors, you're getting it. And remember that even if there's a little bit of mold hidden in your air conditioning duct, you're constantly being exposed. You're breathing that in and out, especially now that it's July and it's summer and it's hot. People turn on their air conditioning. And in the winter, if it's heat and there's anything. So anyway, the point is you're breathing a lot of mycotoxins. Let me take you a little further. Let me take you to children first. Okay, mold is an equal opportunity pollutant. There was a study way back in the mid 90s, in 1994. There was a major rain that flooded parts of Cleveland, and in an area of dilapidated buildings. And 3 months later, 3 months, not right away. When there's a flood or something, it's not right away. It takes a little while. It takes about 3 months or so. Parents noted their children were coming in, they were taking their children to emergency rooms, limp and blue. Okay, and a very astute pediatric pulmonologist, specialist in lungs in children, by the name of Dr. Dor Dearborn, said, okay, he was at the Cleveland Clinic, and he found, make a long story short, Stachybotrys mold causing hemorrhage in the lungs in these children. So, and that's a published study. The mold, essentially, when you have a flood, and it doesn't have to be a flood, you can have a slow leak behind your refrigerator where there's a hookup for the ice maker, et cetera, et cetera. You can have that little leak, or behind your washer, or behind and underneath your dishwasher, etc. Molds can grow up anywhere. You're going to have mold growth, and so as a result, the government says that CDC, EPA, all of them say that mold starts growing in about 24 to 48 hours after exposure. So, and let me tell you another thing about molds. They cause inflammation. You inhale these spores, and they cause inflammation. And inflammation triggers an immune response. That's standard medicine. So what you want to look at is that you have to understand that inflammation is basically the basis for a lot of problems in our health. And as a result, inflammation it triggers the immune system. And sometimes if that inflammation is ongoing day and night, day and night, day and night, the immune system becomes dysfunctional, goes haywire. And then that results in autoimmunity. Autoimmune diseases like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, etc. Let's look at size for a minute. Your hair is about 75 to 100 microns thick, depending on the person. 1 micron is 1 millionth of a meter. A meter is more or less like a yard, give or take. Spores are usually about 13 microns. Okay. Mycotoxins are 0.1 microns. So they go to the deepest part of when you inhale them. They can be absorbed through the skin. They're ingested. So let's talk about ingestion of molten mycotoxins. We know that molds multiply, and they multiply very quickly. And as they multiply, they release mycotoxins. So in the medical literature, the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, that's called NIOSH for short, the CDC, the World Health Organization, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization have all said that approximately 25% of our food contains mycotoxins because mold's growing on things in agriculture. It's outdoors. What, especially, how about grape juice, beer, coffee? Coffee comes from a bean, okay? And of course, all your crops, rice, wheat, soy, corn, all those. So, but it's parts per billion. What do I mean by parts per billion? Imagine 10 football fields all covered with a golf ball, one golf ball, okay, all over. And you take off from all those 10 fields full of golf balls, covered with one layer of golf balls, one golf ball. And that's what you find in food, peanut butter, okay, peanuts. So how do you get rid of it? Your normal person will pee that out. It comes out in urine. And that's a good thing. So when people do this urine testing, and they find mycotoxins in urine, remember, urine is an excretion of the body, like stools, like sweat. So it's a good thing when urine is found in urine mycotoxins are found. However, interestingly, it doesn't mean you're sick from it. Okay, it's a good thing. You're getting rid of what you don't want. That's what the kidneys do. So let's go a little bit further. What are the effects of molds and mycotoxins? They affect the immune system. Why? Because they're very potent protein synthesis inhibitors. They go all the way down to the mitochondria and affect the mitochondria, for those of you listening who are doctors, etc. So affects the respiratory system. We know that. Asthma, for example, if children have asthma, one of the places to look for is there mold in their room or where they go to school. And remember about schools, they have mold problems in schools because schools are built to the lowest bidder. And so they leak, they have all kinds of problems. GI system, gastrointestinal system. So all these areas are affected by molds. How bad are mycotoxins? Just to go on a little bit into the mycotoxin field, they cause cancer. Cancer of the esophagus, cancer of the kidneys, cancer of the liver, testicular cancer, but only in men. And one of the things about liver cancer is that mycotoxins can induce liver cancer with a 10-year latency. In other words, you're exposed here, and 10 years, somewhere in that 10-year period, you can develop cancer of the liver. So these are not good things. Okay, so what do the diseases, what can be called mycotic infections? Okay, mycosis is the study of molds. So it can cause fungal sinorhinosinusitis. So Dr. Ponickow, who was at the time head of ear, nose, and throat, otorhinolaryngology at the Mayo Clinic, decided to find out what is the cause of all these chronic sinus problems. And he did it surgically because he would clean out these people surgically. And he took out the mucus that was affected, sent it to the lab and said, find out what it is. I mean, is it some bacteria? What bacteria could it be? Or is it's a virus, etc. 96% mold. Okay, 96%. So all of these people who have chronic sinusitis and take antibiotics, well, you're taking the wrong medication. And remember, one of the things mycotoxins do is they cause your immune system to react and form antibodies. And here's a very important fact. Antibodies to mycotoxins can form adducts and bind to human tissue. And when that happens, it can trigger autoimmunity. And we've seen that time and time again. The good news is when you get rid of it, you can actually watch the titers for autoimmune disorders slowly go down and the patient get better and these are no longer an issue. So, what other things can I tell you that you don't know? First of all the organs affected by the molds and mycotoxins, and especially mycotoxins, it's the brain. What you have with the brain is that um, the brain has about 100 billion cells, and these cells, neurons, they're called neurons if they're in the brain, need oxygen and nutrients. So you have about 400 miles of blood vessels in your brain. It's a very delicate system. And therefore, your central and peripheral nervous system, meaning your brain and all the nerves in your arms and your legs, can become affected. And as they get affected, one of the most common effects is loss of myelin, demyelination. Your nerves are coated with uh, myelin. It's kind of like rolled up like a rug, okay? And the nerve is inside it. This is rolled up like a rug around it. And we've done and published studies on how due to exposure to molds and mycotoxins, antibodies form against myelin, and so it eats away the myelin, and these patients suffer from what is known as CIDP. It's a long word. It's chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. But that's what happens. I can also tell you that autoimmune disorders such as MS, multiple sclerosis, can be triggered by exposure to molds and mycotoxins, and that's something that people that's been published and et cetera. So we know that you can get affected. People can get affected in their brain and their peripheral nervous system by molds, but especially mycotoxins because they're toxic. Another important thing is that many doctors who don't know that much about molds and mycotoxins, the symptoms that patients present with, the doctor may misdiagnose them with fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. And here's something interesting. Recently, we have seen patients who have chronic Lyme and can't get better under the treatment of Lyme doctors who know what they're doing. When they're tested for mycotoxins, about 70% of them come out positive for antibodies to mycotoxins, which I think is a very interesting factor. Remember, the World Health Organization calls molds and mycotoxins the great masquerader for the 21st century. Great masquerader, pretends it's other things. So no wonder people get misdiagnosed. The doctor is doing his best, trying to help them and everything. But unless these doctors have studied and read and kept up with molds and mycotoxins, they may put them in that category. Another factor that's I think is very interesting is that molds and mycotoxins are a player in Alzheimer's disease. A friend of mine, Dr. Dale Bredesen, colleague, who's done his life's work has been Alzheimer's. In one study demonstrated that there was a study showing that brains of people who died with Alzheimer's can have mycotoxins. So those are important factors to remember. Now, what can I tell you? Why are people misdiagnosed? What do you get? Fatigue, numbness and tingling, short-term memory loss, headaches, joint aches and pains, shortness of breath, cough, chronic, anxiety and depression, personality changes, abdominal pain or discomfort, hair loss, tingling sensations, tremors. Many mycotoxins are tremorgenic, causing tremors. I had a patient who flew in to see me. He was an interventional radiologist. These radiologists are specialized in that they can use imaging, et cetera, to figure out in a 3D image where they have to put a long needle to say, I don't know, into the liver, for example, and inject a medication into a particular spot in the liver or other organs. And he was in his mid 40s, and he came to see me because he couldn't work. Because you can't put those fine little needles in if your hands are shaking. And it was exposure to mycotoxins in his molds and mycotoxins in his home. So what do you do? Okay, here's your patient. You figured out it's molds and mycotoxins. Key issue here, first, is when that patient presents and you can't figure out, let's forget about molds and mycotoxins. You're trying to figure out what the patient's problem is. The first thing you want to do is detect what the problem is. Find out what the problem is. What is the cause of this illness? The second thing you want to do is remove that from the patient. And the third thing you do is repair the damage. I'm being very basic, but that's what you want to do. In mycotoxins, one of the things I want to bring up is if people tell you that they found ochratoxin, which is a well-known mycotoxin, in their urine, it cannot be excreted by the urine. It's bound 99.8% bound to albumin, the body's number one protein, and as a result, you can't excrete it through the kidneys and through any part. So if you find it in your urine, that there's a mistake, there's an error. Remember, the most important thing I said to you, one of the very important things I should say that I told you in the beginning, was that antibodies to mycotoxins form adducts which bind to human tissue and trigger autoimmunity. An excretion can't do that. It's clinically irrelevant there. So that's the relevance of doing it correctly. What should a doctor look at in patients? First, make sure to get serum immunoglobulin levels, immunoglobulin M, immunoglobulin A, E, and G. Now, G is also subdivided into 4 different classes, subclasses. So make sure, if you're a clinician and listening in, make sure you do that. And I always was careful in getting an autoimmune panel. And the other thing I always got were neurological autoantibodies. These are antibodies that attack the myelin that we talked about earlier and other tissues that are for nerves. It's useful if there's symptoms to get pulmonary function tests. Now, again, go by symptoms. Don't go by a protocol. Everybody gets the same thing. One size fits all. No. So pulmonary function tests are helpful. I like to do what are called nerve conduction tests because they're inexpensive and can be done by a technician who's trained. And what this helps tell you if there's anything going on in the peripheral nervous system. I also do, when it's indicated, what are called brainstem auditory evoked potentials, which give you a lot of information about the auditory pathways and the brainstem in here. And those can be important, and also visual evoked responses, which can tell you if there's optic neuritis or optic atrophy or myelin plaques. And remember, the first rule is get the patient away from the toxin or the toxin away from the patient. First rule. And at the same time, rebuild the immune system. Now, the immune system can be rebuilt basically using supplements, vitamins, minerals, things of that nature. Having done that, I usually give certain neuroprotective supplements such as melatonin, vitamin D3, 5,000 international units daily. Studies have shown, these were done in England, that high dose vitamin B complex, B1, B2, B3, B6, B7, uh, B12, etc. High dose of that helps. And if it gets, if there's a lot of demyelination and issues with the central and peripheral nervous system, intravenous gamma globulin can be given, but very carefully and under certain conditions, that because there's people here that are not medically trained, I'm not going to tell you doses and so on and so forth. Glutathione helps. A good probiotic helps, as long as that probiotic is with bacilli that form spores, spore-forming bacilli, basically because Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, 90% are destroyed by stomach acid when you take them orally. So I like the one that's produced by Biobotanicals. That's the one I recommend. And what you want to focus on in a patient is not following strict whatevers. The first thing when you see the patient returning, the first thing you should ask that person is, how do you feel? Are you getting better? I have used and continue to use antifungal medication, most commonly itraconazole. Ask them how they feel. Again, the immune system is unique and different for each patient. So the thing to do is, how will they react? Some patients, 3-4 months, they're fine. Other patients who lived in a moldy area for a long time, were constantly exposed, and didn't get the right kind of help, well, those patients might need it for 6 months or a year. You don't know unless you ask, how are you feeling? How do you feel today? I also do on patients antibodies to mycotoxins, my MyMycoLab. These are immunoglobulin G and immunoglobulin E antibodies to 12 different mycotoxins, a dozen of IgG and a dozen to IgE. The list of mycotoxins is basically satratoxin, verrucorin and verrucorol, ochratoxin, both ochratoxin A and B, that only counts as one though. T2 toxins, vomitoxin, also known as DON for deoxynivalenol, and cladosporium toxin, alternaria toxin, aspergillus toxin, sterigmethocysteine, mycophenolic acid, which is a penicillium toxin, the neurotoxin from aspergillus and penicillium, which is gliotoxin, which is a neurological one, and one that Dr. Dale Bresson, who I mentioned before, and I've discussed. And then finally, Stachybotrys toxin, which is trichothecene. So these are the antibodies that, when you have the results, it's not a positive or negative. It's, do you have low count, moderate count, high? And the IgE, you get sometimes people don't have IgE, they only have IgG, immunoglobulin G antibodies, okay? When they have IgE, that affects your mast cells. And mast cells release all kinds of things, including histamines, etc. And those can cause damage as well. So what you want to do with your patients is also tell people that what they eat, they should control. In other words, I tell all my patients, don't buy these packaged, wrapped in plastic things like this. I tell them high protein, lots of proteins to help build up your immune system. Remember, mycotoxins are potent protein synthesis inhibitors. Your body doesn't build protein, and it needs to have proteins. So, as such, you've got to have, I think, a good grasp of a good, healthy diet. Of course, the Mediterranean diet is the best one to use. uh, and that's been demonstrated thoroughly in the medical literature, et cetera, et cetera. I want to also encourage people to, if they have the possibility, do infrared sauna, because infrared sauna gets what, just like you get rid of mycotoxins through your urine, you get rid of mycotoxins through the effects of sweat. And let me bring up another issue that doctors ask me a lot: binders, cholestyramine, Questran. If you look at all the things that Questran binds, not only bad but good things, you don't want Questran or cholestyramine. I've been asked about clay, etc. The best thing to use is something that's been used for a long time, is inexpensive, doesn't have all these side effects. Activated charcoal. Simple, easily gotten. Okay? And you don't need fancy, I don't know what test and to do things that, you know, stimulate the excretion and all this. This is, I've worked on patients with mold since the late 90s. So I have a lot of experience. And I've worked with people like Drs. Kay Kilburn and Dr. Rajdani, and Dr. William Ray, and many, many others, and we shared our knowledge. There's one issue that I get asked a lot by both patients and doctors, and that is, how do you clean the home? Well, I think that's a very good question, and all these companies say they're the best. You get 5 different bids. Each one says theirs is the better than the other. The industry is not standardized. However, there is one company that I do encourage using, because they use a particular product, and it's the only product that OSHA has certified, tested, and certified. So if you want information like that, go to mymycolab.com, MYMYCO lab, myco as in mycotoxin, lab.com. In a couple of more days, I'm going to have the link to that particular company put on there, because it's important that people have their home cleaned and the mold gotten rid of, so they can go back in and live a normal life with treatment for their body and treatment for the home, so to speak. Because I don't know how to treat homes, I know how to treat people. I invite you to go to My Myco Lab if you want to ask direct questions to me about anything that we've discussed here. Please feel free, and thank you for attending, because I know people from the United States, Canada, Mexico, and other countries are listening in on this. I would like to, if you have the questions, Campbell at mymycolab.com. That's the email. If you want to look up studies that I've published on molds and mycotoxins, there's, I think, about 19 of them that are published, and they're in pubmed.gov. That's the National Library of Medicine under the auspices of the National Institutes of Health. These articles are peer-reviewed, etc. Some are chapters from medical textbooks, etc. Everything that I've said and done is evidence-based. In other words, if it's not evidence, it's not worth it. It's an opinion, and everybody's got an opinion. No, everything I've said and everything I've written is evidence-based. My latest article that was published 10 days ago, July 1st, was on, is it Lyme or is it mycotoxicosis? And actually, it could be either one or both. So also, I've had success with patients, children with autism, they get affected. And there's a difference in how well they do. I can tell you, there's a doctor in the United States that's treating an autistic children without any prescription drugs, supplements only, and he's successful in treating these kids. Mothers and parents are delighted. He does the blood mycotoxin serum analysis from My Myco Lab, uses that as his guideline, repeats it after 3 or 4 months treatment, and these titers go down, 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 down. So, and that's without use of prescription medication, which is, I think, great. I really admire this doctor, this clinician. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions, etc. And I hope I've covered in general things about molds and mycotoxins. And I guess there's a part somewhere on here I'm not very technically inclined, so you have to forgive me. I don't know if there's any questions that you can write in on or something of that nature. Just let me know. Or you, as I said before, you can go to My Myco Lab and A. Campbell at mymycolab.com, and I can answer your questions. And I hope this was this was helpful. For those of you who are clinicians, go to the medical literature, the peer-reviewed medical literature. There's 10,000 or more studies on antibodies to mycotoxins. And if there's a doctor who's saying, oh, this and this works, look up what they've written. You know, I'll put my works up to anybody, because of some of these people who they might have 4 or 5 studies. Okay, I've got 19. And it was shared, and my 19 were written by a group of us, not only just me. So I hope that's been helpful, and goodbye, everyone. And I hope you come back to the second one that we'll give you. And now I'm going to see how I can figure out if you have questions on being a non-technical person. I see here there's a chat, etc. So, but I don't know where to look for questions. If you know, let me know. What else can I tell you that's interesting while I sit here, right? The dose for itraconazole is twice a day, 100 milligrams. There's some people who say it affects your liver. 13,000 patients, I still haven't had one over 13,000 who's had any liver issue. And what I did was, in the beginning, I tested liver function tests every 30 days. Nothing. So then I pushed it up to 6 weeks. And I kept it at 6 weeks to be safe. Never, ever anything. So that's basically what I want to tell you there. Remember that there are certain, I've talked about the foods, agriculture products today come from all over the world. So what's in your supermarket and what you purchase can have come from some other countries. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind the Mediterranean diet, because really that's the best diet to have, whether you have issues with molds or mycotoxins or you just want to be a healthy person. That's the diet to go with. I think that I've seen in many patients their symptoms. This is not something where in a month they're well. I usually told my patients to come see me every 2 months, and for those that lived or that live like in other countries, I have a Skype conference every other month. I don't see them every week or every month, unless it's children, because children have a faster and higher metabolic rate, so things can change with them faster. And thank goodness today there's such things as Skype and things like that you can deal with people. Anyway, I think I don't see any way to get quick. So I'll leave it at that. And
Dr.
thank
Campbell.
you. Yes.
In order to get questions, you need to find the questions tab on the interface over to the right of the screen.
I see that. I see names, but I don't see any questions. I just
click on the little square on there. That should open a window with the questions.
Okay, here's one. Is the blood test available internationally? No, it's available internationally. The lab gets samples from the last one internationally was from Ireland just very recently. There's a question about, can I address the misdiagnosis of Lyme and it really being a mold issue? Yet the symptoms, and I put this in the article that just got put, are like parallel. So it's very easy for a doctor, especially if you go to a Lyme specialist. Well, he's going to be convinced it's Lyme, it has to be. You have to keep an open mind to people who come in and they have all these symptoms. Oh, it's Lyme, it's fibromyalgia, it's chronic fatigue. No, do the tests. And another question from Mississippi: how long do mycotoxins last in your body, or they never go away? So you found out you have mold, mycotoxins, you get treated, etc. Remember, mycotoxins are very, very potent immune suppressants. So when you build the immune system back up, that immune system grabs the mycotoxin and kicks it out and destroys it. So how long do they last? They last as long as you're not treated. You do not have immunoglobulin A reactions in many patients. You mainly have immunoglobulin G and E. And I discussed this with Dr. Vajdani of Immunosciences Laboratories. He says it's either going to be G or E. It's really not going to be A. And him being the top person in autoimmunity and antibodies, etc., he's a genius, literally. I took him by his word. The other question I get is how many days, weeks after the adult or child has been removed from the mold source do their serum levels start to reduce? It's not only removing from the source, it's repairing. Remember, detect, remove, repair. So you've got to repair. Otherwise, not much is going to happen. Am I seeing any connection between EMF exposure and mold toxicity in the home? No, I haven't seen that yet. I know about the EMF toxicity. I'm also the editor-in-chief for 2 peer-reviewed and indexed medical journals that are published. Those articles all go to PubMed. So I published, I think, one of the first EMF articles. Then it was from Australia. The authors were from Australia, and what they did is they noticed changes in the inhabitants when the electric company came and put EMF readers on the electric meters, and the whole community got affected. So I know about EMF, but EMF and mold is 2 different entities, and they don't interact. Now, some of the symptoms for either one are similar. Any other questions? Let me know. I think that's about all the questions. So I hope this has been helpful. And again, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you may have at acampbell@mymichaellab.com. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've been helped. Take care. Bye-bye for now. See you next time. Tell your friends.
Thank you very much for attending our webinar. I noticed there was one question that we didn't get to. Dr. Campbell probably couldn't see it. So please let us know if you have any more questions. And I posted to the chat the email testing@mymichaellab.com. So if you have any questions, just email them directly there or communicate with Marina Campbell, and they will try to answer all your questions as fast as they can. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.